Today I'm going to tell you a story about a giant of a man with a broken heart and a woman the world tried to break but couldn't. A runaway wagon, a desperate fall through dust and fear, and a pair of arms strong enough to catch her, and everything she carried inside. But some secrets don't stay buried, not even in a river. And sometimes the past comes riding back. You won't believe what waits for them at the end of that trail. If stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more waiting down the trail. The Oregon Trail wound beneath the stoic gaze of the Blue Mountains, their sheer slopes bathed in pale morning light. The path was nothing more than a ribbon of dust and rock, worn smooth by countless wagon wheels and footfalls. Maggie Bell leaned forward in the wagon, tracing bruises with her fingertips. Her heart was heavy as the wheels turned every groan of the undercarriage, echoing her own silent sorrow. The failure of her homestead haunted her like a ghost drifting through empty rooms. She had traveled west with such hope, her husband Jason by her side, the dream alive in their hands, but that dream lay shattered in broken fence posts, failed crops, and cold, damp barns. Now she was heading east, back to a place that felt hollow, carrying only grief and resignation. A sudden jingle of metal and a sharp snorting panic seized the air. One of the horses reared half wild-eyed, and then the whole team bolted. Maggie's breath caught. The leader clattered against the side with a bone-jarring slam. "Samuel, hold them," she called, but her nephew's words were lost beneath the deafening roar of hooves and the wagon's violent creak. The boy stumbled. The reins slipped. The wagon jerked. Maggie's journal went flying. A moment later, her world lurched sideways as she was flung against the railing. The sides of her head pressed hard against raw wood. She gray out for an instant. She snapped back into focus mid-shout. The wagon tilted, and she felt gravity pull her off the bench. Fear squeezed her lungs. There was no time to think, only to feel the snap of wind, the dust stinging her eyes, the hard shake of impact, and then air. For a heartbeat, she hovered above the ground. The world swung wildly, sky to earth, blur of pine trunks and bonnet brim. She braced for broken bones, but they never came. Instead, she landed in arms solid as oak. Thad Kane's hands closed around her. His arms were massive, steady, protective. There was no hardness there, only a quiet steadiness, a calm that seemed to rebuke chaos. The wagon screeched behind them, tossing planks and spokes into the dust as it crashed into a nearby oak. Maggie's breath returned in ragged gasps. She lay suspended in his embrace, warm, silent, safe. Her knees pressed to his thigh. His arms held her securely, even as everything else screamed otherwise. I got you," came his voice, slow and halting, laced with stuttered humility. It was the sound of a man unused to gentleness, reluctant to speak such words, but he said them anyway. She closed her eyes against the pounding of her heart, letting relief wash through her. Her cheek pressed into flannel. She smelled leather and pine sape, horsehide, and something faintly like wild mint. It was real. She was safe. The world settled. Dust drifted where the wagon had been. The horses had vanished, hooves pounding through brush and shadow. Thad eased her gently to the ground, none of the abruptness she had expected, just steady, careful movement. Only when she stood did he release her. He ran one large rough hand over his dark hair, brushing dust from the brim of his hat. His breathing came slow, measured. His features were calm expression, unreadable, but a flicker crossed his eyes as he gazed at her. "Maggie Bell," he said softly. The words came out carefully, deliberate, but not just words. Acknowledgement. She stared at him. Her mouth was dry. "Yes," she said. "That's me." He nodded. I know." Shock splashed through her. She looked at him again, trying to read his face, but something held her back. She realized she'd never heard anyone use her name like that. Not since Jason died. How did you know? She began. He glanced away, shifting sheepishly. I heard the name on the trail. A message told the caravan to look after Maggie Bell. I was waiting ahead. A warmth bloomed in her chest, rippling through sorrow. He looked so large, so silent, and yet there was something in the way. He held himself unassuming, each breath measured as if every step he took had weight and purpose. The wrecked wagon lay beyond splintered wood against the dust. Paige's clothing, hope, belonging all scattered. He bent to pick up her journal. Dirt had found its way inside. He held it carefully, as though it were a wounded bird. I'm Thad Kane, he said. But everyone calls me Thad. She took the volume from him, fingers trembling. Maggie Bell. He nodded, eyes soft. Pleased to meet you. She swallowed the lump in her throat. She didn't know what came next, not yet. But beneath the fear and the grief, beneath the loss of home and dreams, something unexpected stirred. Beneath the hat, the rough voice, the stutter, she felt an ember of something warm. It's thank you, she said, voice scratchy like old rope. You saved my life. Thad looked down, shame, and something else in his eyes. Humility, maybe guilt. I just did what anyone would have. I was near. They stood in silence, dust motes drifting like memories in the hot air. The morning sun filtered through the pines, illuminating her hair and casting his shadow long along the ground. Maggie let her breath steady. Her limbs trembled, but her heart slowed. Thad's presence anchored her. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture small, domestic, almost fragile in such wild surroundings. His lips tilted, half smile, uneven, but genuine. Glad to know that. And for the first time in weeks, Maggie Bell felt less lost. The morning had turned golden sunlight, dripping through the thinning trees, as Maggie tried to stand, only to find her ankle weak beneath her. Pain flared. She winced and sank back to the ground with a soft groan. Thad was at her side in an instant, his brows knitting beneath the brim of his hat. Ankle, he asked, crouching down beside her. His voice was soft, worried, the stammer barely audible now. She nodded, biting back a hiss. Rolled it bad, I think. He didn't ask for permission, just scooped her into his arms again, careful, as if she were made of glass. She didn't protest. Something about him made resistance feel unnecessary. Trusting him came as naturally as breathing. I can carry you to the temple's wagon, he said. They ain't far. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling oddly small in his arms. Thank you, Thad. They moved through the trees slowly. Dust clung to his boots and pine needles whispered beneath their steps. Maggie watched the branches shift overhead, thinking of the trail, how it had led her away from everything she'd known, only to twist back on itself, offering no clear path forward. Thad's silence wasn't awkward. It was comforting, even companionable. He wasn't a man to fill the air with noise. Instead, he moved like someone who had learned to listen to the land, to horses, and maybe, Maggie thought, to pain. They reached a clearing where the caravan had paused. The temple wagon stood steady beneath a tall cedar, its sides weathered but well kept. Randy Temple stood by the fire pit, puffing on a pipe, his long white beard catching the sun. Helen, sturdy and quick-eyed, looked up as Thad approached. Lord Almighty, she said, dropping a pan of biscuits. Maggie Bell, what in heaven's name happened? She took a fall, Thad answered. She needs to lie flat, Helen said, already moving to spread blankets near the fire. Randy, go get Ada. Randy didn't argue. He shuffled off, muttering about fools and runaways and face her fate. Thad knelt to place Maggie down, gently adjusting a pillow beneath her head. His hand lingered at her shoulder for a second longer than it needed to. Then he stood. I'll stay close, he murmured. She watched him retreat a few paces, then stand like a sentinel, his gaze scanning the trees, but his posture taut with concern. Ada Lee arrived minutes later. She moved like flowing water, quiet, purposeful. Her black braid shimmered in the sun. She knelt by Maggie's ankle, cool fingers probing the swelling. Sprained, she said simply. Not broken, but she won't be walking for a few days. Maggie sighed. That figures. Ada glanced at her face, then deeper, as if she saw something beneath skin and bone. You've got more pain than this leg, she said softly. Maggie blinked. Excuse me? Ada didn't press further. She wrapped the ankle with linen, soaked in crushed herbs, then turned and left without another word. Helen offered tea and biscuits. Randy grumbled. The camp slowly returned to its rhythm. By evening, Maggie sat propped against a pillow, beside the temple fire, a blanket over her lap, and steam rising from her cup. The mountains glowed red in the dusk, and somewhere an owl hooted softly. Thad returned leading 2 horses by the reins. He hesitated before approaching, then sat down at the far edge of the fire. You always rescue broken things, she asked. He looked surprised, then shrugged. Not always. Sometimes I can't. She studied his face, the way his eyes flickered toward the fire, but not into it. I've been broken a long time, Thad, she said. The kind of broken folks can't see. That's worse, I think. He was quiet a moment. Then he said, I can see it. She didn't know what to say to that. The Salais felt honest, not uncomfortable. I was supposed to make a life with Jason, she said, voice low. We built a house out there in Kansas, dug up the sod, planted wheat, even got a milk cow. But the storms came. Then the sickness. Then he went missing. They found his horse drowned in the river. His hat, too. Everyone assumed. She trailed off. I lost someone, too, Thad said. A sister. Long ago. I'm sorry. He nodded, looking away. The fire crackled. Sparks danced upward like restless ghosts. You speak like you don't want to, she said gently. He smiled faintly. I stopped talking for a while. When I was little. After, you don't have to explain. He looked grateful for that. And still his eyes held more than his mouth ever would. That night, beneath stars like spilled salt across the heavens, Maggie found sleep slow in coming. Her body ached, her mind more. But the memory of strong arms catching her, of kindness, not asked for, lingered. In the days that followed, she rode in the saddle behind Thad. As they continued east, he lifted her with the ease of a man born to labor and placed her gently behind him. His back was broad, his presence a buffer against the wild. They didn't speak much, but when they did, it mattered. She told him about her mother's songs, about losing her first baby, about the time Jason built her a rocking chair from cedar scraps. He listened, not like most men, but like someone who understood that words could be lifelines. He didn't speak much about himself, only hinted at years wandering, at things he'd seen men do, and worse things he'd done. She didn't press. Not yet. Randy and Helen rode nearby. Helen sometimes sang hymns under her breath. Randy told long-winded stories that looped and meandered like old rivers. They bickered affectionately. They loved like 2 trees grown side by side. Oda came and went like a shadow, always watchful, always quiet. She gave Maggie a new poultice and one evening murmured, "Your ankle is healing. But that's not the wound I worry about." Maggie didn't reply, but the words stayed. And through it all, Thad was there. He said little, but when she needed help from the saddle, his hands were there. When the nights grew cold, he added wood to her fire. When thunder rolled, he stayed awake watching the trail. By the time they reached the next crossing, Maggie knew something had shifted. Not just the landscape. Something in her, in him, in the quiet space between. And though neither spoke of it, both felt the trail had begun to bend, not toward the past, but toward something fragile and unfinished. Toward a tomorrow they hadn't planned for, but maybe needed. The stars were scattered like silver dust across a velvet ski, quiet and ancient. The forest slept save for the occasional chirp of a night bird or the distant crack of a limb giving way in the wind. The caravan had long gone still, and Maggie Bell sat by the fire, the glow painting her face in amber hues. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Thad Kane sat across from her, his back to a pine stump, legs stretched toward the flames. His hat sat beside him, and in the firelight, his features looked softer, more human than hulking. They'd shared meals before, shared space on the trail, but tonight felt different, like a waiting silence had grown roots between them. Maggie stared into the fire. You ever wonder if the trail only leads back to where you started? Thad shifted, considering. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes it just feels like it circles you instead. Like it waits for you to change before it does. She looked up at him. That sounds like something someone wise would say. He smiled crooked. Stole it from Helen. She chuckled, then fell quiet again. Her voice turned lower, more hesitant. I don't think I ever grieved, right, Thad? Not really. I buried myself in chores and debts and other people's expectations. I kept moving because stopping meant facing the truth. Thad didn't rush to answer. He reached for a stick, poking at the fire until sparks danced upward. I did the same, he said. After my sister died, I drifted. Took work no one wanted. Rode places no one missed me leaving. I got real good at disappearing. You don't seem like the disappearing kind, she said. I was. Still am sometimes. Their eyes met across the flickering light. Something in his gaze, worn, honest, unafraid of her pain, made her feel exposed and comforted at once. I wasn't just grieving Jason, she confessed. I was grieving the person I thought I was supposed to be with him. A wife, a settler, a success. Thad nodded slowly. That's a hard ghost to carry. A long pause settled between them, not awkward, just full. Then, he leaned forward slightly, voice barely above the crackle. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Maggie blinked. Of course. His hands tightened around the stick he held. I was there, near the river, where Jason disappeared. I didn't know his name back then. Just a man who looked like he was running from something. He was saw it. Said folks were after him. He asked me to help cross the river. Maggie's breath caught. I helped him tie the horse, but the current was stronger than we thought. The horse spooked, he fell. I tried, Maggie, but I couldn't get to him in time. I thought he'd drowned. The fire crackled sharply. Maggie's mouth was dry. She opened it, then closed it again. I never told anyone because I thought maybe I made it worse. Maybe if I hadn't helped at all. She stared at him. The guilt in his voice was real, raw and trembling. And yet something in her shifted. You were the last person with him, she whispered. He nodded. I didn't know who he was. Not until they said your name. That's why I came to help. I thought maybe I owed you that. Her hands trembled in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, thank you, she said. For telling me. I can't pretend it doesn't hurt, but I'd rather know than wonder. Thad looked like he might cry, but didn't. He just nodded once sharply. A breeze stirred the trees. The fire hissed. Maggie leaned toward him. So did he. There was something tender suspended in that breath of space, something tentative and brave. Their foreheads nearly touched. And then Thad. The voice broke the moment. Randy Temple's silhouette emerged from the dark, his old lantern swinging. Sorry, he said, squinting. Didn't mean to interrupt. But y'all need to see this. Thad stood instantly, his hand instinctively brushing Maggie's arm. They followed Randy across the camp. Several figures gathered near the edge of the tree line, lanterns raised. A rider approached through the mist. slowly. A lone horse burdened and muddy. And on it, a man. Maggie's knees went weak. The rider dismounted with effort, leaner than she remembered, pale, hollow-eyed. But that voice, Mag. Her name left his mouth like a prayer. It was Jason Bell. Not a ghost, not a memory. Flesh and bone, alive. Her husband, returned. The dawn after Jason's return felt wrong. Too quiet, too cold. A fog hung low over the Oregon Trail, wrapping the world in a muffled silence. Maggie sat on the wagon step, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of bitter coffee gone cold. Jason Bell slept nearby, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, body gaunt, eyes sunken. In the firelight the night before, he'd looked like a man, come back from the grave. And in some ways, he had. Maggie's heart was a battlefield. Just days ago, she had started to believe in the possibility of something new, something honest and quiet and true, with Thad Kane. And now the past flesh and bone sat across the fire, with her name still on his lips. She hadn't slept. Her thoughts spun all night, like wagon wheels stuck in the mud. How could Jason be alive? Why hadn't he come back sooner? Why now? Jason stirred. She looked up just as he pushed himself upright and blinked against the gray morning. "You always did wake early," he said, voice raspy. She managed a nod. It's habit. He studied her like she was a letter he didn't quite know how to read. "I owe you an explanation." She waited. "I didn't die," he began obviously. "But I came damn close. That river pulled me under, dragged me down past the bend. I hit my head, woke up downstream with nothing. No horse, no money, no name." He scratched at his beard. "There were men looking for me. Gamblers. I was in deep, Maggie. Too deep. That horse was a warning. I thought, if I stayed dead, maybe they'd stop looking." Maggie's fingers tightened around her cup. "You didn't send word," she whispered. "All this time I couldn't. Didn't know if you'd be safer not knowing." She stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "I mourned you. I buried you in my heart, Jason. I know. And I hate myself for it. But I'm here now. I want to make it right." The words rang hollow. She turned away, breath catching. Her ankle throbbed, but the pain was distant, drowned beneath the wave crashing in her chest. Across camp, Thad stood near the horses, saddling one for the day's travel. He didn't look her way. She hobbled toward him, heart pounding. "Thad," she said. He paused, then turned, but his eyes avoided hers. "Morning. Did you know," she asked, "that Jason might have survived?" He shook his head. "Not until I saw him. But you were there. You told me." "I was. I thought he drowned, Maggie. I swear it." His voice was thick with guilt. And something else, distance. The warmth she'd come to lean on had gone cold overnight. "I don't know what to think," she said softly. Thad nodded. "Then maybe, give it time." She blinked. "Are you leaving?" "I'm still part of the caravan. But I'll keep to the back." The words struck her like a slap. "You're running." He didn't deny it. Maggie turned away, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Later that afternoon, the caravan slowed for a midday rest. Maggie sat alone near the edge of the meadow, the wind tugging at her shawl. She watched the trees shift and sway, the grass bend under pressure. Everything moved forward, except her. Ada Lee appeared quiet as a shadow, and knelt beside her. "Your soul's in knots," she said. Maggie managed a bitter laugh. "So is my life." Ada looked over at the camp where Jason was laughing with a young boy, then toward where Thad sat sharpening a knife in silence. "You are not the same woman who buried her husband," Ada said. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Ada's voice was low, like the hush before a storm. "That man, Thad, he carries shame like a stone in his chest. You see it, don't you?" "I do." And still, he caught you when the world fell apart. Maggie nodded silent. Ida stood slowly. You should ask him why he was near that river. Why he helped your husband. Some debts aren't owed in coin. Maggie looked up. You know something. Ada didn't answer. She simply walked away. That night, the fire burned lower than usual. Jason approached with a plate of beans and offered it to her. She shook her head. I'm not hungry. I'm trying, Maggie. I came back for you. She looked at him, at the man who'd once held her dreams. He looked back with hollow eyes and promises too late to matter. I don't know if I can come back for you, she said. He didn't argue. Across the fire, Thad sat alone watching the flames with the stillness of a man holding in too much. And Maggie Bell realized she stood at a crossroads, not just on a map, but in her heart. The trail was long, the past heavy. But somewhere ahead, a choice waited. One that would break someone, or free them all. The trail twisted like an old scar through the hills, carving its way between forest and sky. The caravan moved slowly that morning, the air thick with dust and silence. Maggie rode in a supply wagon, her injured ankle propped on folded blankets, but her mind traveled farther than the wheels. She watched Thad from a distance, how he kept to himself, always just outside the campfires, always helping without being asked. There was something about his Christet that no longer felt like peace. It felt like exile. Randy Temple rode beside her for a while, hat pulled low, chewing the end of a matchstick. He ain't the man you think he is. You know, Randy said finally. Maggie turned to him. You're talking about Thad? Randy nodded. I knew that name sounded familiar. Took me some time, but I remembered. Years ago I was in Abilene, when the Marshals Board posted a notice, Thad Kane bounty man. He hunted outlaws for pay. Maggie's mouth went dry. A bounty hunter. Meanest job a man could take, without selling his soul, Randy said. But I heard he quit after a job went bad. Real bad. Maggie said nothing, but the puzzle pieces began to shift. Later that day, she found Thad near a stream, crouched beside his horse as he checked the hooves for stones. She approached slowly, heart heavy. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. He didn't look up. Didn't see the point. You were a bounty hunter. He nodded. I was. Long time ago. You hunted men for money. Men who'd done bad things, he said, most of them. And Jason Thad finally looked at her, shame in every line of his face. He was on a list. Fraud, debts, maybe worse. I was sent to find him. I did. But I didn't know who he was to you. Didn't even know his name back then. Just a scared man near a river. He begged me to help him cross. I did. Then I saw him fall. And you thought he died. I reported it that way. Told the law he was gone. I wasn't trying to lie, I believed it. But it ended my run. I couldn't do that work anymore. Maggie stared at him, the wind rustling through the leaves like whispers. And now, she asked, I'm trying to make things right. In whatever ways I can. She turned away, emotions churning. That evening, Randy approached her at the fire, voice low. I heard something you ought to know. She looked up. I was walking past Jason's tent. He didn't see me. He was talking to someone, maybe himself, maybe a snake. But he said your name, said he didn't come back to be forgiven. Said he came back to get what's his. Maggie's heart clenched. Said the land, the claim in Kansas, it was in your name. He wants you to come back and sign it over. That's all. She stood slowly. Are you sure? I'd swear it on Helen's grave, and she ain't dead yet. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched the fire burn low, her hands clenched in her lap. She thought about Jason's lies, Thad's silence, and her own cowardice. The woman she had been would have ignored it, folded in on herself, let the men choose the path. But that Maggie was gone. At dawn, she found Jason at the water trough, splashing his face. "We need to talk," she said. He looked up, water dripping from his beard. "Finally, ready to come with me?" "No," she said. "I'm ready to ask you to leave." He blinked. "What? You came back for land, not for love, for control, not for redemption. I don't want you here. I don't trust you." His expression hardened. "You don't mean that." "I do. You're my wife." "Not anymore." He stepped closer, voice sharp. "You think that big stammering ox can protect you?" She didn't flinch. "I don't need protecting. Not from you." A crowd had started to gather, Helen, Randy, even Ada. Jason looked around, seeing his audience. "You'll regret this, Maggie." "No," she said. "I regret staying silent for so long." Jason glanced toward Thad, who stood in the shadows behind the horses. He spat in the dirt. "All right, I'll go. But you'll miss what we had." She shook her head. "I already miss the woman I used to be. But I'm not her anymore." He rode out that afternoon without another word. And for the first time in years, Maggie Bell felt free. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or who she would become. But the trail ahead was hers to walk. The morning after Jason's departure had been quiet, eerily so. Maggie moved about the camp, with a steady purpose, helping Ada gather herbs, checking supplies, keeping her mind busy. Thad had kept to the far side of the caravan, doing chores with his usual quiet diligence. But something heavy still hung in the air, unspoken and unfinished. By late afternoon, the sky began to darken with clouds not of weather, but of consequence. Jason had not gone far. He returned at dusk. His horse was lathered with sweat, and his face was twisted in something between rage and desperation. The caravan had stopped near a stream for the evening fires, just beginning to crackle into life. Jason dismounted roughly, eyes scanning the camp, until they found Thad. Without a word, he chartered. Maggie was the first to scream. Thad turned just in time to catch the full brunt of Jason's fist across his jaw. The hit landed hard. Thad staggered, but didn't fall. Jason came again, fists wild. "You think you can steal my wife?" Jason shouted. "I never stole anything." Thad growled, dodging and landing a defensive shove that sent Jason stumbling backward. Maggie ran forward, but Ada grabbed her arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Let him fight this one." Jason lunged again, but this time Thad was ready. He didn't swing first, only blocked, absorbed, redirected. He didn't fight like a man angry. He fought like a man tired of hurting. But one punch landed square in Thad's ribs, and he doubled over, gasping. That was when Maggie moved. She picked up the rifle that leaned against the supply wagon. Her hands trembled as she leveled it at Jason. "Stop!" she shouted, voice breaking. Jason froze, blood on his knuckles, breathing heavy. "I said stop," Maggie repeated, tears brimming. Everyone in the camp had gone still. Randy and Helen watched silently. Ada stood close, eyes alert. Even the horses seemed to wait. "Put him down," Jason, Maggie said. "Or so help me, I'll put you down myself." Jason looked at her wild-eyed. "You wouldn't." She didn't lower the rifle. "Try me." Jason's gaze flicked to Thad, who had sunk to his knees, one hand pressed to his ribs. "You don't belong here," Maggie said. "Not any worse." Randy stepped forward. "You heard the lady. You're not welcome on this trail." Jason glared at them all, at Maggie, at Thad, at the caravan van. Then he spat in the dirt and turned. He mounted his horse, casting one last hateful look, and rode off into the dusk. Silence returned, broken only by the wind through the trees. Maggie dropped the rifle, her whole body shaking. She rushed to Thad's side, dropping to her knees. "You're hurt," she said. He tried to wave her off. "I've had worse." Ida appeared, already pulling salve and cloth from her satchel. "Help me get him to the fire," she told Maggie. They lifted him together, guiding him to a soft patch near the campfire. Thad winced, but didn't complain. Blood seeped slowly through his shirt ribs, likely bruised or cracked. Ada worked quickly, hands steady. Maggie stayed close, holding a lantern for her, watching every flinch of Thad's brow. "You didn't fight back," she said. He looked at her through the pain. Didn't want to give him what he came for. Maggie swallowed hard. "Why did you save me that day, Thad? When the wagon ran?" He blinked slowly, then said, "Because once I didn't." Ida paused, eyes flickering. "I was on a job," Thad said quietly. "Back when I hunted men. There was a kid barely out of boyhood. He wasn't guilty, just scared. Wrong place, wrong time." I hesitated. "And someone else shot him." Maggie felt her throat tighten. "I never got to make that right," he said. "But when I saw you falling, I didn't think. I just knew it." Maggie reached for his hand. He let her take it. "I'm glad you did," she whispered. He nodded, eyes closing. The fire crackled. Ada stood and quietly walked away, giving them space. Maggie stayed beside him until the moon rose. That night, Thad Kane slept under the stars, ribs bandaged, pain dulled by medicine, and something stronger, hope. And Maggie Bell sat beside him, no longer broken, no longer lost. She'd stood her ground. She'd chosen her path. And she knew now, courage didn't always come with a gun. Sometimes it came with staying. The final night on the trail was quieter than the rest, as though the land itself had run out of words. The fires burned low, flickering shadows on the canvas sides of wagons and the worn faces of travelers. The scent of pine smoke mixed with the faint sweetness of dried apples passed around for dessert. Somewhere, a harmonica played a slow tune, one that sounded like goodbye. Maggie Bell sat by the fire, with a folded piece of paper in her hands. The edges were worn, the ink smudged in places, her handwriting uneven. It was a letter she'd written months ago, perhaps even a lifetime ago, to Jason. She had never sent it. She had carried it across states, through grief and hunger and dust, like a stone she wasn't ready to let go of. She opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the words already memorized. It wasn't long, just a few sentences, confessions, hopes, anger, confusion. Things she couldn't say when he was alive. Things she now knew she didn't need to say at all. Ida sat nearby, silent as always. Helen and Randy had turned in early, whispering blessings into the darkness. Thad was at the edge of camp, tending to the horses, though Maggie knew he wasn't checking tack so much as giving her space. She held the letter closer to the flames. "I loved him," she said aloud, voice soft. "Even when I shouldn't have, even when it hurt. But I think I was more in love with the idea of him than the man himself." Ada didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her presence was answer enough. "I wrote this when I thought it would help me let go," Maggie continued. "Turns out, I didn't need a letter. I needed the truth." She fed the paper to the fire. The flames took it eagerly, curling the corners, devouring the past one line at a time. As the last of it turned to ash, she felt something unwind in her chest, a thread of sorrow snapping loose. When it was gone, Maggie felt a strange emptiness and a surprising lightness. Not relief exactly, but space. Space for something else to grow. The next morning, the sun rose slow and gold over the ridge, casting long amber streaks across the meadows. Dew sparkled on the grass like tiny stars, and the call of a lark split the hush of dawn. The wagons creaked to life, wheels groaning, voices soft with the melancholy of parting. It was the kind of morning that carried both endings and beginnings on its breath. Maggie stood beside her packed bundle, watching steam curl up from her coffee tin. Her ankles still ached, but she could walk, now walk without limping, without bracing. It felt symbolic. Thad stood near his saddled horse, adjusting straps. His coat was dusted with trail and time. He looked up when she approached, his expression unreadable but warm. "You going east?" she asked. He nodded. "There's a place near Spokane. Quiet. Good land. I thought I'd try again." She looked at the horizon where the trail disappeared into the light. "And if I said I wasn't sure where I'm going?" He smiled, small, hesitant. "Then maybe we find out together." She met his eyes. There was no rush, no grand declarations. Just the steady offer of shared road, of time, of something real. Something that didn't promise perfection, but dared to be honest. He reached out a hand. She took it. They mounted their horses side by side. Maggie turned once to look at the trail behind them, the ghosts, the pain, the weight. It was all still there, but smaller now, as if the distance had dimmed its hold. She thought of Jason not with bitterness, but with closure. She thought of Ada's quiet strength, of Helen's humor, of Randy's old wisdom, of the firelight, the bruises, the nights full of stories and stars. As they rode west into the rising sun, the sky lit up with promise. Not a perfect ending, but the beginning of something true. And for the first time in years, Maggie Bell rode not away from something, but towards something she chose for herself.